During a supposed make-peace dinner with my estranged son, the maid filled my wine glass and slipped a folded napkin into my hand. I glanced down and froze. In shaky handwriting it read, "Don't drink. Pretend you feel sick and leave now. They're waiting." My whole body began to shake, but I pushed back my chair, mumbled something about not feeling well, and hurried out to my car. I drove a little way down the street, parked, and sat there watching the house from a distance. 10 minutes later, everything began to make sense. I'm glad you're here with me. Stay with my story until the end, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I want to see just how far my story travels. My name is Joanne, and at 66 I believed I had already survived every kind of betrayal life could throw at me. I was wrong. But the worst one was still ahead of me, wrapped up in a polite dinner invitation from my own son. The call came on a Tuesday morning in late October. I was in my tiny kitchen, working through my second cup of coffee and trying to stretch my monthly budget far enough to cover the heating bill, when Curtis's name lit up my phone screen. We hadn't spoken in 3 months, not since our last fight about his wife, Rebecca. "Mom." His voice sounded different, quieter, gentler, almost like the boy I remembered before he married into money and forgot his roots. "Curtis." I set my mug down, my heart already pounding. My son didn't call unless he needed something, and that had been our pattern for the past 2 years. "I was thinking maybe we could have dinner this weekend," he said. "Rebecca and I would like to have you over. Saturday night? 7 o'clock. Nothing fancy, just family time." The words felt practiced, as if he'd rehearsed them in front of a mirror. I stared out the window at the old oak tree in the yard, the one Curtis used to climb when he was little. The leaves were turning gold again, just like they had the day his father died 5 years earlier. "Why now, Curtis?" I asked. "Does there have to be a reason? You're my mother." "Rebecca thinks we should try to fix things between us," Rebecca thought. Everything in Curtis's life now seemed to begin and end with what Rebecca thought. She had swept into our world 2 years ago with designer outfits and a flawless smile, then slowly wiped away every trace of the family Curtis once held dear. "I'll think about it," I told him, even though I already knew I would go. No matter the distance, no matter the missed holidays and cold silences, Curtis was still my baby, the child I'd raised alone after his father walked out when Curtis was 8, the boy I'd put through college by working 3 jobs and sacrificing every comfort I could. "Great, I'll text you the address," he said. "The address?" As if I didn't know where my own son lived. But in a way, maybe I didn't. The Curtis I knew had lived in a modest downtown apartment. This version of Curtis lived in a sprawling home in Millfield Estates, the kind of neighborhood where the driveways were longer than my entire street. Saturday arrived sooner than I wanted. I spent an hour agonizing over what to wear before finally settling on my navy blue dress, the one I'd bought for Curtis's wedding. It was the nicest thing I owned that still fit. New clothes weren't an option anymore. My fixed income had to stretch to cover whatever my late husband's insurance hadn't. The drive to Millfield Estates felt like crossing a border into another life. Perfect lawns rolled out like green carpets, and every house looked like it had been plucked from a magazine shoot. I found Curtis's address and sat in my car for a few moments, gathering courage I hadn't realized I needed just to visit my own child. Up close, the house was even more intimidating. 2 stories of pale stone and dark wood, with wide, gleaming windows that reflected the world back like mirrors. I rang the doorbell and listened as the fancy chime echoed inside. Rebecca opened the door, as beautiful as ever in a cream sweater that probably cost more than my entire monthly grocery budget. Her smile was flawless and empty, the performance of warmth with none of the feeling. "Joanne, we're so glad you could make it," she said, brushing her cheek against mine in the lightest of air kisses, her expensive perfume wrapping around me. "Curtis is in the kitchen finishing dinner. You look nice." The small pause before nice told me exactly what she thought. I followed her through rooms that looked like a catalog spread, everything beige, white, and carefully arranged. No family photos, no clutter, no sign that anyone actually lived there. Beautiful, yes, but cold to the bone. Curtis came out from what I assumed was the kitchen, drying his hands on a dish towel. He looked good, maybe a little thinner than before, and there was a tiredness in his eyes I didn't remember seeing until after he married. "Mom!" He hugged me, but the embrace was quick and distant, like greeting a polite acquaintance rather than his own mother. "Thank you for inviting me," I said, and I meant it despite everything that stood between us. "Let me take your coat," Rebecca said, already reaching for it. "Curtis, why don't you get your mother something to drink?" "What would you like, Joanne? We have a lovely Pinot Grigio," she added. "Water is fine, thank you." I'd learned to be cautious with alcohol around Rebecca. She had a talent for twisting words, and I wanted my mind clear. Rebecca guided me into the dining room, where the table was set for 3 with fine china that probably cost more than my car. In the center, a lavish arrangement of white flowers rose from a glass vase, beautiful but completely scentless. Pretty, hard but lifeless, just like everything else in that house. "Dinner will be ready in just a few minutes," Curtis called from the kitchen. "Why don't you two get comfortable?" Rebecca settled across from me, cradling a glass of wine, her sharp green eyes examining me as if she were studying a specimen. "How have you been, Joanne?" she asked. "Curtis worries about you, you know, living alone at your age, handling everything by yourself." The words themselves were kind enough, but something in her tone made my skin prickle. There was an implication there, a hint I couldn't quite name. "I manage just fine," I replied carefully. "Of course you do." She smiled thinly. "But Curtis and I have been talking. He feels awful about how distant things have become between you two. Family should stick together, don't you think?" Before I could respond, a woman I'd never seen before stepped into the dining room. She was middle-aged, Hispanic, dressed in a simple black dress and carrying a bottle of wine. Maria," Rebecca said, not even looking at her. "Perfect timing. Please pour some wine for Mrs. Henderson." "Actually, I asked for water," I said, turning toward Maria. Her dark eyes met mine for just a heartbeat, and in that fleeting moment I saw it. Fear, urgency, a silent warning that made me sit up straighter. Something here was very wrong. "Of course," Maria said quietly. "I'll bring you water right away." She moved around the table, pouring wine into Rebecca's glass as she passed behind my chair. As she leaned over, I felt something small and folded press into my palm. A napkin. I forced myself to look down at it as casually as I could. Scrawled across the cloth napkin in rushed, uneven letters were 4 words that turned my blood to ice. "Don't drink. Leave now." My heart started pounding. I looked up for Maria, but she had already stepped away, her expression carefully blank. Across from me, Rebecca sipped her wine, chatting about something I could no longer register over the roar in my ears. "Actually," I heard myself say, pushing back my chair so fast it scraped against the floor. "I'm not feeling very well. I think I should go home." Rebecca's brows knit together. "Oh no, what's wrong?" I pressed my hand lightly against my stomach, keeping the napkin hidden in my palm. "Just a bit of a stomach ache, probably something I ate earlier. I should really be going." "But, Mom!" Curtis appeared in the doorway, his face lined with real worry. "Dinner's almost ready. Are you sure you can't stay?" The concern in his voice nearly broke me. This was my son, the child I had raised, loved, and sacrificed everything for. But Maria's warning burned in my hand like a live coal. "I'm sorry," I managed to say. "Rain check." I headed toward the front door before either of them could argue further, Rebecca trailing after me with polite protests and apologies about how awful it was that I didn't feel well. "Let me get your coat," she offered. "I can manage," I replied, already reaching for it myself. "Thank you for dinner. Curtis, I'll call you tomorrow." I practically fled to my car, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. As I pulled out of their driveway, I caught a glimpse of Curtis and Rebecca standing in the doorway, watching me go. I drove 3 blocks before pulling into a grocery store parking lot. My whole body was trembling. I smoothed out the napkin and read the words again. "Don't drink. Leave now." What had been in that wine? What exactly had they planned for me? I sat in my car as the sun went down, staring at those 4 words, and slowly realizing that my own son, the boy I had trusted with my entire heart, had been involved in something truly terrible. I didn't know why yet, but I was determined to find out. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Maria's frightened expression and felt that napkin being pressed into my hand. By 6 a.m., I was already dressed and sitting in my car outside Curtis's neighborhood, waiting. I knew Rebecca left for her yoga class every Sunday at 8:30. Curtis had mentioned it back when he still shared things with me. I parked across the street, partially hidden behind a delivery truck, and watched their house. Right on schedule, I saw Rebecca's silver BMW back out of the driveway and disappear down the road. 10 minutes later, I was at their front door. Maria answered, still in her pajamas and a thin robe. The second she saw me, the color drained from her face. "Mrs. Henderson, you should not be here," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder anxiously. "Please," I said. "I need to know what you saved me from last night." She hesitated, then opened the door wider. "Come in quickly. Mrs. Rebecca will be back in 1 hour." I followed her into the kitchen. The remains of last night's dinner still lay on expensive plates, like a crime scene frozen in time. Maria moved briskly, clearing dishes while constantly checking the windows. "Why did you warn me?" I asked. Maria stopped and looked at me, her eyes full of sorrow. "Because I have seen this before. With Mrs. Rebecca's grandmother." My stomach lurched. "What do you mean?" "Sit, please." She motioned to a stool at the kitchen island. "Mrs. Rebecca, she is not who you think she is." I sat down, suddenly feeling unsteady. "Tell me." Maria spoke slowly, her English careful but clear. "I worked for Mrs. Rebecca's family before she married your son. Her grandmother, Mrs. Patricia Whitmore, very kind woman, very rich. Mrs. Rebecca was always visiting, always so sweet." She twisted her hands together, gathering courage. But then, Mrs. Patricia started to get confused, forgetting things. Mrs. Rebecca said she wanted to help, to take care of everything. She said she needed papers to manage the money and decisions. "What kind of papers?" I asked. "Power of attorney, everything." After that, Mrs. Rebecca could do anything, sell the house, move money, decide where Mrs. Patricia lived. A chill spread through my chest. What happened to her grandmother? 6 months later, Mrs. Patricia was in a nursing home. "A bad one," Maria said quietly. "Mrs. Rebecca sold the house, took all the money. Mrs. Patricia died there, alone and confused, always asking for family who never came." The kitchen suddenly felt too small, like the walls were closing in. "How much money?" $800,000, maybe more. The house alone was worth $300,000. All gone. I clutched the edge of the counter to steady myself. "And you think Rebecca was planning to do this to me?" Maria nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "The wine last night, it had pills. They make you sleepy, confused. Then the papers." "What papers?" Maria stepped out of the room and came back with a manila folder. Her hands trembled as she opened it on the counter in front of me. "I found these in Mr. Curtis's study yesterday," she said. "I was dusting and they were on his desk. Inside were legal documents with my name printed at the top, power of attorney, a medical directive, and something called a conservatorship application. My signature line was blank, but everything else was already filled in, neat and official." "They were going to drug me," I said slowly, the words tasting strange in my mouth. "Make me sign these while I was impaired." "Yes." Maria then pulled out one more item, a glossy brochure for Sunset Manor Assisted Living. I knew that place. And it was on the rough side of town, the kind of facility where people were sent to fade away quietly and be forgotten. "Mrs. Rebecca already made an appointment for you," Maria whispered. "Tuesday morning. She told them you have dementia, that you cannot live alone, safely." I stared at the brochure. The dreary building, the staged smiles of elderly residents. That was where they intended to put me. That was where I was meant to spend whatever years I had left, while Rebecca and Curtis used my life insurance money, sold my house, and lived off the inheritance my husband had left me. "How long have they been planning this?" I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. "Since Mrs. Rebecca found out about your money," Maria said softly. "She asked many questions about your house, your finances. She thinks I don't understand. But I hear everything." "Curtis knows about this?" I whispered. Maria's expression collapsed. "Mr. Curtis, he is not a bad man," she said quietly, "but Mrs. Rebecca, she is very good at making people believe what she wants. She told him you are getting forgetful, that you cannot manage alone. She showed him bills you forgot to pay." "I've never forgotten to pay a bill," I said, anger and disbelief twisting together in my chest. "I know," Maria replied. "She takes some of your mail. She hides the bills to make you look irresponsible. Then she helps Mr. Curtis pay them from his account." The betrayal didn't hit all at once. It came in waves. Not just Rebecca's cold, calculated cruelty, but my son's willingness to believe that I was slipping, that I was becoming a problem to be handled rather than a mother to be honored. "There is more," Maria said softly. I didn't think I could handle more, but I nodded anyway. "Mrs. Rebecca already has buyer for your house," she continued. "Her friend from yoga class. They plan to sell it for $650,000 even though it is worth more. Quick sale, no realtor fees." My house. The home where I had raised Curtis, where his father and I once laughed and fought and celebrated, before everything fell apart. Every room there held a memory of the family I thought we were, apparently memories that meant nothing to my son anymore. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Why risk your job to help me?" Maria dabbed at her eyes with a dish towel. "Because of Mrs. Patricia. She was kind to me, like the grandmother I never had. I watched Mrs. Rebecca take everything from her. I watched her die alone and afraid. I could not stop it then. I was young, scared, and I needed my job." She straightened, her voice gaining strength. "But I am not young anymore, and I will not watch it happen again." We sat in heavy silence for a moment, the weight of what she'd revealed settling over us like a thick blanket. "What do I do now?" I finally asked. "You must be very careful," Maria said. "Mrs. Rebecca is smart. If she finds out I told you, she will find another way. Maybe a worse way. You need proof. Something that shows Mr. Curtis who she really is." "I need proof," I repeated. "Evidence he can't ignore." Maria nodded. "I can help, but we must be careful. Mrs. Rebecca, she watches everything. Everyone." The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made us both freeze. Maria darted to the window. "She is back early," she hissed. "You must go out the back." I through the garden. I stood, my legs still unsteady. "Maria, why didn't you warn Mrs. Patricia?" "I tried," she said, her voice breaking, "but no one believes the help over the family." She gave me a sad, weary smile. "Maybe this time will be different." I slipped out the back door just as I heard Rebecca's key turning in the front lock. As I hurried through the perfectly groomed garden, her sharp, demanding voice floated out, calling for Maria. By the time I reached my car, parked 3 blocks away, I felt like a different woman than the one who had arrived an hour earlier, the mother who had spent 2 years wondering why her son had turned so cold, so distant, blaming herself for the widening gap between them. Now I knew the truth. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't even entirely Curtis's fault. It was Rebecca, and she'd done this before. But this time, she'd chosen the wrong target. This time, someone was going to fight back. On Monday morning, I sat in my car outside Sunset Manor, staring at the building that was supposed to become my prison. The brochure Maria had shown me hadn't exaggerated. The place was just as bleak in person, peeling paint around the windows, a parking lot full of potholes, and the sharp smell of industrial disinfectant that seemed to seep straight through the brick walls. According to Maria, Rebecca had made an appointment for me here, tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. An evaluation I knew nothing about, for an illness I didn't have. I took a breath, pulled out my phone, and dialed the main number. "Sunset Manor, this is Jennifer speaking." "Hi, this is Joanne Henderson. I believe my daughter-in-law." "Rebecca Henderson, scheduled an appointment for me tomorrow?" "Oh, yes, Mrs. Henderson. Let me just pull up your file." I listened to the clicking of her keyboard. "Here it is. Intake evaluation tomorrow at 10 a.m. Your daughter-in-law provided your medical history and explained your situation. We're very sorry to hear about your recent decline." "My recent decline?" I repeated, my voice going flat. What exactly did she say about my condition? "Well," Jennifer continued, "according to Mrs. Rebecca Henderson, you've been experiencing significant memory loss and confusion, with some wandering episodes. She also mentioned you've been forgetting to take your medications, and that there was an incident last week where you left the stove on all night." I tightened my grip on the phone. Not a single word of it was true. "She also said you've become quite combative when family members try to help. Very common with dementia patients," Jennifer added. "She's very concerned about your safety living alone." "I see," I said slowly. "And who did she speak with there?" "That would be our admissions coordinator, Mrs. Patterson. She oversees all new resident evaluations." "Thank you," I replied. "I'll see you tomorrow." I hung up before my temper could get the better of me. Rebecca had constructed an entire false narrative about who I was, a confused, dangerous old woman who needed to be locked away for her own good. And they had swallowed it whole. But outrage and Maria's story weren't enough. I needed hard evidence, something undeniable that even Curtis, already primed to see me as unstable, would be forced to recognize. So I drove to the public library and spent 2 hours digging into the life of Rebecca Whitmore before she became Rebecca Henderson. What I uncovered chilled me to the core. Yes, Patricia Whitmore had died at Sunset Manor 3 years earlier, but the public record didn't match the sympathetic story Rebecca had told. Patricia had been a retired professor, described by former colleagues in a university newsletter as sharp as a tack. She'd been working on her memoirs right up until the time she was placed in the nursing home. There were other troubling details. Patricia's house had been sold for well below market value to an entity called the Whitmore Family Trust, a trust controlled entirely by Rebecca. The sale had gone through about 6 months before Patricia's death, and around the same time neighbors reported that Patricia had become withdrawn, confused, and unlike herself. I photocopied everything I found and drove home with a thick folder of documents on the passenger seat. But even with that stack of papers, I knew it still wasn't enough. Rebecca was clever, careful. If I wanted to expose her, I would need more than just a trail of suspicious transactions. On the surface, she left a spotless paper trail. Everything looked proper, reasonable, even caring, if you didn't know where to look. My phone rang just as I was pulling into my driveway. Curtis. "Mom, how are you feeling?" he asked. "Rebecca said you weren't well when you left last night." The concern in his voice nearly shattered me. This was my son, the little boy who used to bring me fistfuls of dandelions and declare them the prettiest flowers in the world. How had Rebecca managed to convince him his own mother was falling apart? "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a small stomach bug," I said. "That's good," he replied. "Listen, Rebecca wanted me to ask you something. She's really worried about you living alone, and we were thinking maybe it might be time to consider, well, some kind of assisted living situation." There it was. The script. "Curtis, I'm only 66. I'm perfectly capable of living by myself." I know," he said quickly. "But Mom, you've been forgetting things. Last month you called me 3 times asking if I was coming for dinner, and we hadn't made any plans. And Rebecca said when she visited last week, you couldn't even remember her name." I had never called him about dinner. Rebecca had certainly not visited me last week, or any week. Every word he spoke had been planted there. "When exactly did I supposedly call you about dinner?" I asked. "October 15th, he said. "You sounded really confused when I told you we didn't have plans." I grabbed my calendar off the kitchen counter and flipped to October. The 15th was a Tuesday. I had spent that entire day at the senior center volunteering at their book sale. 12 different people could confirm I'd been there from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. "Curtis, I was at the senior center all day on October 15th, I said calmly. "Volunteering. I have witnesses." Silence. "Maybe I got the date wrong," he said at last. but I could hear the doubt creeping into his voice. "And Rebecca never visited me last week," I continued. "Not then, not ever. She has never once come to my apartment." "Mom, that's not—" "She said you seemed confused when she stopped by." "That's exactly the sort of thing we're worried about." "Curtis, listen to me very carefully," I said, my voice steady. "Rebecca has never been to my apartment, not one single time in the 2 years you've been married. If she told you she visited me, she lied." "Why would she lie about something like that?" he asked. I took a deep breath. This was the moment that would either pull my son back to me or push him away forever. "Because she's planning to have me placed in a nursing home and take control of my finances," I said, "just like she did with her grandmother." The silence on the line stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Mom, that's a very serious accusation," he said finally. "It's a very serious situation," I replied. "Curtis, I need you to come to my apartment, alone. There are things I need to show you. I can't just walk out of work in the middle of the day because you're making wild accusations about my wife," he snapped. "Then come tonight," I said, "after Rebecca goes to her book club." Rebecca didn't have a book club, but Curtis didn't know that. "How do you know about her book club?" he asked. "Lucky guess," I said. "Will you come?" Another long pause. "Fine. But Mom, if this is just paranoia or confusion—" "It's not," I cut in. "And Curtis, don't tell Rebecca you're coming to see me." "Why not?" "Because if I'm right about what she's planning, she's dangerous," I said. "And if I'm wrong, then it won't matter anyway." I spent the rest of the day preparing. I laid everything out on my dining table like evidence in a trial: the Sunset Manor brochure, the photos Maria had taken of the power of attorney and conservatorship forms, the research on Patricia Whitmore, my calendar proving I couldn't have made those supposed phone calls. At 7:30, I heard Curtis's car pull into the parking lot. My hands trembled as I opened the door. He looked exhausted, older than his 38 years. Marriage to Rebecca had worn him down in ways I don't think he even recognized. "Okay, Mom, I'm here," he said stiffly. "What is all this?" I gestured to the spread of documents covering the table. "Sit down, sweetheart. We need to talk." For the next hour, I took him through everything: Maria's warning, what she had seen happen to Rebecca's grandmother, the legal documents with my name on them, and the lies told to the nursing home, the fabricated stories about my confusion. I watched his expression shift from skepticism to doubt to dawning horror as each new piece fell into place. "This can't be right," he said at last, clutching the power of attorney forms. "These have to be fake." "Call the law office listed at the top," I said quietly. "Ask if Rebecca Henderson has been in contact with them about conservatorship proceedings for me." He stared at the letterhead for a long moment, then pulled out his phone. The firm picked up, even though it was after 8. "Yes, this is Curtis Henderson," he said. "I'm calling about conservatorship paperwork being prepared for my mother, Joanne Henderson." "Yes, I'll hold." I watched his face crumble as he listened. "I see," he said finally. And when was this consultation scheduled?" "Tomorrow morning. I understand. Thank you." He ended the call and looked at me, eyes full of pain and disbelief. "She met with them last Thursday," he said slowly. "Paid a $5,000 retainer to start conservatorship proceedings. The attorney said she told them I was fully on board and that you'd been diagnosed with early-stage dementia." His voice dropped to a whisper. "She used our joint account, $5,000 of our money, to have my own mother declared mentally incompetent." I reached across the table and took his hand. It was shaking. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," I said softly. "I know how much you love her." "I thought I did," he replied, staring down at the documents. "But the woman I love, she wouldn't do this. Would she?" Before I could answer, his phone lit up. "Rebecca." "Don't answer," I said quickly. "Why not?" "Because right now she thinks everything is going according to plan," I said. "If you pick up and she hears anything off in your voice, she'll know we're on to her. We need to be smarter than that." Curtis watched the phone buzz until the call finally stopped. Then he looked at me with the same lost expression he'd had as a little boy when his father walked out, scared, vulnerable, desperate for someone to make it right. "What do we do now, Mom?" he asked. Curtis stayed at my apartment until nearly midnight, going over every single document, every screenshot, every note I'd collected. I made us coffee and sat with him as he began to truly understand. The woman he had married, the woman he thought he knew, was not who she claimed to be. "I keep thinking there has to be some kind of explanation," Curtis said, staring down at the Sunset Manor brochure in his hands. "Maybe she honestly believed you needed help? Maybe she was trying to protect you." "Protect me from what?" I asked quietly. "From having my own money? From living in my own home?" He set the brochure down and dragged his hands over his face. "I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. Curtis, I need to ask you something, and I want you to really think before you answer." "Okay. Has Rebecca ever encouraged you to pull away from me? Little things, maybe. Hinting I was too demanding, or that I was holding you back somehow." He fell silent, staring into his coffee as if the answers were somewhere at the bottom of the mug. She said you seemed jealous of our relationship," he admitted at last. "In that you were struggling with not being the most important woman in my life anymore." "And you believe that?" I said. "It made sense at the time," he murmured. "You did seem upset when we got engaged." I had been upset, but not because I was jealous. I'd been upset because I saw my son changing in front of me, turning into someone I hardly recognized, harder, less kind, less like the compassionate boy I had raised. "What else did she say about me?" I pressed. "She said you'd had a hard life and that maybe you were becoming bitter," he said, shame written across his face. "She said it was natural for older people to get more demanding, more critical." He finally looked up at me. "She made it sound like I was being a good son by giving you space. Like I was doing the right thing by stepping back. By cutting me out." I corrected softly. "It wasn't supposed to be cutting you out," he said quickly. "It was supposed to be healthy boundaries." I could see Rebecca's strategy clearly now, how she had isolated him from me little by little, using therapy language and his love for her as tools to pry us apart. "Curtis, when did you first start noticing that I was supposedly becoming forgetful?" I asked. "About 6 months ago," he said slowly. "Rebecca mentioned that when she called you, you seemed confused, mixed things up, repeated yourself, asked the same questions over and over." "Rebecca has never called me," I said flatly. "Not once." He blinked. "That can't be right. She told me she calls you every week to check on you." "Check my phone records," I said, "right now." Curtis pulled out his phone and called our wireless provider. After being transferred twice and confirming his identity as my emergency contact, he finally got access to my call history for the last 6 months. "There are no calls from Rebecca's number," he said slowly, his face draining of color. "None. At all." "Because she never called," I said. "She's been lying about every conversation she claims to have had with me." We sat in silence while Curtis tried to reorganize his memories around this new reality. I could almost see him replaying past conversations, watching them crack and crumble in his mind. "The night we had dinner last Saturday," he said finally, "you left because you felt sick." "I left because your housekeeper slipped me a warning note," I corrected, "telling me not to drink the wine and to leave immediately." Curtis went white. What kind of warning?" "The kind that suggested you and Rebecca had put something in my drink," I answered, "to make me confused and compliant enough to sign legal documents." "Jesus Christ!" He shot to his feet and began pacing my small living room. "What kind of person did I marry?" "The kind who's done this before," I said quietly. "Curtis, I need to tell you about Rebecca's grandmother." I walked him through everything I had uncovered about Patricia Whitmore, the rushed nursing home placement, the underpriced sale of her house to a trust controlled by Rebecca, the timeline that lined up a little too perfectly. The same pattern was playing out again, this time with me. "We need to talk to Maria again," Curtis said when I finished. "We need to know exactly what Rebecca is planning." "That's dangerous for Maria," I reminded him. "If Rebecca finds out she's helping us—" "Then we'll be careful," he interrupted. "But Mom, If Rebecca has done this before, if she's some kind of— He couldn't bring himself to say it. Serial predator, I supplied. Yes. Then Maria might have the evidence we need, he said, and there might be others she's hurt. The next morning, Curtis called in sick, and we drove to his house together. Rebecca's car was gone. She had left for her usual yoga class at exactly 8:30, right on schedule. Maria answered the door in her uniform, ready for her Tuesday cleaning shift. When she saw Curtis standing beside me, alarm flashed across her face. "Mr. Curtis, Mrs. Henderson, you should not be here together," she whispered. "If Mrs. Rebecca finds out—" "Maria," Curtis said gently, "I know about the documents, about the nursing home, about everything." She stared at him for a long moment, and then burst into tears. "I am so sorry, Mr. Curtis," she sobbed. "I tried to protect your mother, but I was afraid to tell you. Mrs. Rebecca, she said you agreed with the plan." "I never agreed to anything," he said, stunned. "Rebecca told me Mom was getting forgetful, but she never mentioned nursing homes or legal paperwork." Maria wiped her eyes and stepped aside to let us in. "There is more you need to know," she said quietly. "About Mrs. Rebecca's past. About other people she has hurt." She led us to the kitchen and pulled a small notebook out of her purse. "I keep records of things I see, things I hear," she explained. "My English teacher told me, always write down important things." She opened the notebook and showed us pages filled with neat handwriting. Dates, times, our snippets of conversation, observations. It was a detailed log of Rebecca's movements and behavior. "Mrs. Rebecca thinks I am just a cleaning lady who doesn't understand," Maria said, "but I understand everything, and I see a pattern." She flipped to a page dated 3 months earlier. "Here," she said, "Mrs. Rebecca made phone calls to many nursing homes, not just Sunset Manor, 5 different places. She asked about cost and how to admit someone fast." "She was shopping around," I said. "Yes," Maria replied, "and she called lawyers too, 3 different firms before she found one who would help with conservatorship without asking too many questions." Curtis dropped into a chair at the kitchen table. "How long has she been planning this?" Maria flipped further back in the notebook. "First notes about your mother's money, 4 months ago. Mrs. Rebecca found papers in your office, insurance documents, bank statements. She took pictures with her phone." "She's been photographing my mother's financial information," Curtis said hoarsely. "Yes, and she researched house prices in your neighborhood," Maria added. "Talked to a real estate agent about quick sales." I felt physically ill. Rebecca had been cataloging my life like a hunter tracking prey. "Maria," I said carefully, "you mentioned other people Rebecca hurt, besides her grandmother." Maria nodded and turned to another section of her notebook. "Before she married Mr. Curtis, Mrs. Rebecca worked as a home health aide," she said, "but she got fired." "Why?" Curtis asked, his hands curling into fists. "The family accused her of stealing jewelry," Maria said, "and of convincing the old man to change his will, nothing proven in court, but she lost her job. Had to leave town." "Where was this?" "Phoenix, Arizona," Maria replied. 3 years ago. The man's name was Mr. Harold Chen. He died 6 months after Mrs. Rebecca left. "The family had been very suspicious," Maria explained, "but by the time they realized what had happened, it was too late to prove anything." "Are there others?" I asked. "I think so," Maria said. "Mrs. Rebecca is very careful not to leave a trail, but sometimes she makes phone calls and talks about previous clients. She thinks I'm not listening, but I hear everything." She turned more pages in her notebook, showing us fragments of phone conversations, scattered names, cities. A pattern emerged. Rebecca was moving from town to town, victim to victim, and refining her methods each time. "Mr. Curtis," Maria said softly, "Mrs. Rebecca does not love you. She loves your mother's money. That is why she married into a family with an older parent who lives alone." Curtis looked like he might be sick. "She targeted our family on purpose." "I think so, yes," Maria said. "She asked many questions about your mother before the wedding, about her age, her health, her finances. I think she already had a plan when she met you. The front door slammed. All three of us froze. Maria, are you here? Rebecca's voice rang out from the foyer. I forgot my water bottle. Curtis and I were trapped in the kitchen with nowhere to go. Maria gestured frantically toward the pantry, but it was too late. Rebecca appeared in the doorway and stopped short when she saw us. For a long moment, nobody moved. Rebecca's polished mask slipped just enough for me to glimpse the mind working behind it, calculating, measuring, trying to decide how to spin this. Then she pasted on her perfect smile. Curtis, what a wonderful surprise, she said smoothly. And Joanne, you're looking much better than you did on Saturday night. But now I could see past the performance. Her eyes were cold, furious, and dangerous. She wasn't surprised we were there. She was enraged that her careful plans had been exposed. Rebecca stood in the doorway in impeccable yoga gear, her smile tuned to just the right sweetness, but the calculation in her gaze was obvious. She was searching for a way to retake control. What a surprise to find you all here, she cooed. Curtis, darling, why aren't you at work? I needed to talk to Maria about something, Curtis answered carefully. His tone was even, but I saw the slight tremor in his hands. Of course, she said. And Joanne, it's so lovely to see you again so soon. You're feeling better, I hope. I met her eyes without flinching. Much better, thank you. Maria stood rigid, clutching her notebook against her chest. Rebecca noticed it immediately. Maria, what's that you have there? Just my schedule book, Mrs. Rebecca. May I see it? I don't think that's necessary, Curtis cut in, stepping subtly between Rebecca and Maria. Rebecca's smile thinned. Curtis, honey, I was only being friendly. Maria, why don't you go ahead and start on the upstairs bathrooms? We can catch up later. Actually, I said, Maria was just telling us some interesting stories about your previous employers. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Rebecca's smile stayed in place, but something sharp and predatory flashed in her eyes. Oh? She asked lightly. What kind of stories? Stories about elderly clients who suddenly experienced cognitive decline, I said. Clients who conveniently needed help managing their finances and decisions. Rebecca gave a short, humorless laugh. Joanne, you're starting to sound paranoid. Curtis, darling, I really think we should consider having your mother evaluated by a professional. These kinds of delusions can be very serious. Like the evaluation you scheduled for me tomorrow at Sunset Manor? I asked. The mask slipped. For a heartbeat, Rebecca's face went blank with shock before she recovered. I have no idea what you're talking about, she said smoothly. Curtis pulled out his phone. Should I call Sunset Manor right now and ask about the intake appointment Rebecca Henderson scheduled for my mother? Curtis, I think you're being manipulated, Rebecca said quickly. Your mother is clearly having some sort of episode. Then explain these, Curtis said, pulling the power of attorney and conservatorship documents from his pocket. Explain why my wife paid a lawyer $5,000 to have my mother declared mentally incompetent without telling me. Rebecca stared at the paperwork for a long moment. When she looked up again, the sweet, worried daughter-in-law was gone. What remained was cold, calculating, and frighteningly honest. You don't understand, she said quietly. Your mother is getting old, Curtis. She's going to need care eventually. I was trying to plan ahead, to protect everyone. Protect everyone, I said, or protect your access to her money. This is ridiculous, Rebecca snapped, her voice rising. We don't need your mother's money, we have plenty of our own. Do we? Curtis shot back. Because according to our bank statements, you've been spending pretty freely. Yoga, spas, shopping. Where exactly has that money been coming from? I watched her face as she realized Curtis had been looking at their finances. The cracks in her mask widened. I've been working, she said defensively. As what? Curtis demanded. You haven't had a job since we got married. I do consulting, she insisted. Private clients. What kind of consulting? Rebecca's eyes flicked between us, searching for a way out. Personal care consulting, she said finally. Helping families manage aging relatives. Like Harold Chen in Phoenix? I asked quietly. Rebecca went absolutely still. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. "The elderly man you worked for as a home health aide," I continued. "The one whose family accused you of stealing jewelry and persuading him to change his will before you left town." "That's a lie," Rebecca snapped. Maria spoke up for the first time since Rebecca had walked in. "No, Mrs. Rebecca, it is not lie. I heard you on the phone with lawyer in Phoenix. You talked about Mr. Chen, about how his family could not prove anything." Rebecca spun toward her, fury breaking through her facade. "You've been eavesdropping on my private conversations?" "I clean the house," Maria said steadily. "I hear many things, like when you call nursing homes about Mrs. Henderson, like when you talked to real estate agent about quick sale of her house." "Curtis," Rebecca said, her tone turning frantic, "you can't seriously believe them. They're conspiring against me." But Curtis was staring at his wife like she was a stranger. "Is it true about Harold Chen?" he asked quietly. "I worked for an elderly man in Phoenix," Rebecca said. "His family was abusive and neglectful. I tried to help him, and they turned on me when he died." "That's not what happened," I said quietly. "I called the Phoenix Police Department yesterday. They remember the case. They told me Harold Chen changed his will 3 weeks before he died, leaving everything to you, Rebecca Whitmore, instead of his children. His family believed you drugged him and coerced him into signing it." The color drained from Rebecca's face. "They couldn't prove anything because there was nothing to prove," she snapped. "Or because you're very good at what you do," Curtis said slowly, "and what you do is prey on elderly people." "I am not a predator," Rebecca shot back. "I help people. I give care and companionship to lonely old people their families have abandoned. And in return, they just happen to leave you their money," I said. "Sometimes grateful clients want to show their appreciation," she replied sharply. "That's not a crime." "What about your grandmother?" Curtis asked. "Patricia Whitmore, was she just a grateful client when you put her in a nursing home and sold her house?" Rebecca's composure cracked. "My grandmother was losing her mind," she hissed. "She was becoming dangerous to herself. I saved her from hurting herself or someone else by taking $800,000 from her," I said. "I didn't steal anything," Rebecca snapped. "That money was supposed to be mine anyway. She promised it to me when I was a child." "So you decided to take it early," I said. Rebecca's breathing had turned shallow and fast, her polished facade completely gone. "You don't understand what it's like watching someone you love deteriorate," she spat. "Watching them become a shell of who they were. I was merciful. I gave them comfort in their last years." "And put their money in your bank account," Curtis said. "I gave them care," she insisted. "I was the only one who cared about them." "Is that what you were planning to do for me?" I asked. Give me comfort and care at Sunset Manor while you burned through my life insurance?" Rebecca's eyes flashed with pure malice. "You should be grateful someone is willing to take care of you," she said. "Curtis has his own life. He doesn't need to be saddled with a demanding, aging mother who refuses to accept help." "I never refused help," I replied. "You never offered it. You offered theft." "I offered a solution to an inevitable problem," she snapped. Curtis had been quietly recording the entire conversation on his phone. Now he raised it so she could see the active recording. "Say that again," he said softly. "Say it again, for the record." Rebecca stared at the phone, and I could see the moment she realized exactly how much she'd already confessed. For several long seconds, the kitchen was completely silent. Then she lunged. Curtis was faster. He stepped back, holding the phone out of reach. "It's too late, Rebecca," he said. "It's all recorded." Rebecca stood in the middle of the kitchen, chest heaving, the life she'd engineered cracking apart in front of her. When she looked at Curtis again, there was a new, chilling glint in her eyes. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," she said quietly. "You think this is over, but it's not. I've been planning this for months. I know things about your mother you don't. Things that will make you wish you never crossed me." "What kind of things?" Curtis asked. Rebecca's smile reappeared, but this one was twisted and cruel. "Your mother isn't the sweet, innocent victim she's pretending to be," she said. "Ask her about the money your father left. Ask her why she never told you how much there really was." My stomach dropped. Curtis turned to me, confusion furrowing his brow. What is she talking about? Mom? Rebecca's smile widened, savoring the moment. Oh, she never told you, she purred. Your father left more than $300,000 in life insurance, much more. Tell him, Joanne. Tell your son what you've been hiding. Curtis stared at me, waiting. Rebecca thought she'd found the perfect wedge to drive between us, and the worst part was, she wasn't entirely wrong. There had been more money than I told him, just not for the reason she assumed. The silence in the kitchen stretched tight as a wire. Curtis watched me, hurt and bewildered, while Rebecca stood off to the side wearing a look of gleeful expectation, like she was about to watch a bridge burn. Mom, Curtis whispered. What is she talking about? I drew in a slow breath. After 2 years of carrying this secret alone, I was tired. It was time to tell the truth. Your father's life insurance policy was for $800,000, I said, not $300. Curtis went pale. $800? Then why didn't you tell me? Because $500,000 of it went somewhere you didn't know about, I said. Rebecca's triumphant smile faltered. This was not going the way she'd planned. Curtis, I continued, when your father died, he left behind debts. Gambling debts, bad ones, the kind of debts that don't disappear just because someone is buried. Curtis sank into a chair. Dad, gambled? For years, I said. I tried to get him help, tried to get him into treatment, but he couldn't stop. After he died, some very dangerous people showed up at my door. They said the debt passed to his family. How much? Curtis asked, his voice barely audible. No, $480,000. The number landed in the room like a brick. Rebecca's expression shifted from smug victory to genuine confusion. I used most of the insurance money to pay them, I said. To protect you, to make sure they would never show up in your life looking for money your father owed. Why didn't you tell me? Curtis asked again, staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You were 29, I said softly. You were just starting your career, and I didn't want you to know that the father you idolized was a gambling addict who left us in danger. I chose to protect your memory of him instead. Curtis dropped his head into his hands. All these years I thought you were just bad with money. I thought you were struggling because you mismanaged what Dad left us. I let you think that, I said. It was easier than telling you the truth. Rebecca watched us both, baffled and increasingly furious. This revelation had completely derailed her attempt to weaponize the money against me. So, the $300,000 you told me about, Curtis said slowly, lifting his head. That was what was left after you paid off Dad's debts? That was what was left after I paid off the debts, I confirmed. After I covered his funeral, bought this apartment, and put a little aside for emergencies. I met his eyes. The truth is, Curtis, I've been living on Social Security and a small pension from my cleaning jobs. The inheritance Rebecca was so eager to sink her claws into was never as large as she thought. Rebecca's face flushed an ugly red. Her perfect plan had imploded, and now all that was left was her anger. You're lying. There has to be more, Rebecca insisted. There isn't, I replied evenly. The house your father owned, the investments, everything was mortgaged or cashed out to pay off his gambling debts. There was no house, Rebecca, no secret treasure, just a widow trying to shield her son from the truth about his father's addiction. Curtis lifted his head, his eyes shining with tears. Mom, I'm so sorry. All this time I thought you were being reckless with money, and all along you were protecting me. That's what mothers do, I said quietly. Rebecca was breathing hard now, the scaffolding of her perfect plan collapsing around her. This doesn't change anything, she snapped. You're still old. You're still going to need care. Curtis still needs to make plans for that. Curtis can make whatever plans he thinks are right, I answered, but they'll be his decisions, not yours, and they definitely won't involve drugging me and stealing what little I have left. Maria, who had been silent through all of this, suddenly spoke up. Mrs. Rebecca, the police are here. We all turned toward the kitchen window. 2 patrol cars were just pulling into the driveway. Curtis glanced at me, startled. "Mom, did you call them?" "I did," Maria said softly. "When Mrs. Rebecca went to yoga this morning, I called. I gave them my notebook. I told them about Mrs. Patricia and about what she planned for Mrs. Henderson." Rebecca's face went chalk white. "You can't prove anything," she said, her voice high and brittle. "Or it's all hearsay, just stories and paranoia." "Actually," Curtis raised his phone, "I have a recording of you admitting you were planning to have my mother committed and take her money. I think that's more than enough." The doorbell rang. Rebecca looked around like a trapped animal searching for an exit, but there was nowhere left to go. "Curtis," she pleaded, slipping back into that soft, coaxing tone. "You love me. We're married. You can't just stand there and let them arrest me." Curtis looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw the exact second his expression changed. Whatever love he'd once felt was gone. "The woman I fell in love with never actually existed, did she?" he said quietly. "She was just a role you played to get close to my family." Rebecca didn't answer. She didn't have to. The truth was written all over her face. The officers came in and placed her under arrest. She didn't fight, didn't argue, probably because she knew anything she said could be used against her. Curtis gave them his recording. Maria handed over her notebook, filled with months of careful notes and dates. When they left with Rebecca in handcuffs, the 3 of us remained in that spotless kitchen, sitting amidst the ruins of the life she had staged. "What happens now?" Curtis asked finally. "Now you decide who you want to be," I told him. "You can be the man Rebecca tried to mold you into, or you can be the man I raised." He was quiet for a long time, staring down at his hands. Then he turned to Maria. "Maria," he said, "I know Rebecca wasn't paying you what you deserve, and I know you risked everything to protect my mother. If you're willing to keep working here while I figure out what to do with this house, I'd like to give you a raise, a real one." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "You are a good man, Mr. Curtis," she said, "like your mother always say." Then Curtis turned to me. "Mom, I want you to move in here. At least for a while," he said. "This place is too big for one person, and I think we've got a lot of lost time to make up for." "Curtis, you don't need to take care of me," I replied. "I'm perfectly capable of living on my own." "I know you are," he said. "That's not why I'm asking. I'm asking because I miss my mom. I miss the relationship I let Rebecca talk me out of. And I think we both deserve a second chance to rebuild what she tried to destroy." I looked around the house, once cold and sterile, and a museum of Rebecca's control, and tried to picture it with family photos on the walls, clutter on the counters, real life in the rooms. "Would it be all right if I brought some things?" I asked. "Pictures? A few of your baby keepsakes I saved?" Curtis smiled for the first time in what felt like years. "I was hoping you would," he said. 6 months later, Curtis and I were sitting on what used to be Rebecca's pristine white sofa. Now it was softened with colorful throw pillows and cozy blankets. The house didn't feel like a showroom anymore. It felt lived in. Maria had become much more than the help. She was family. Her cooking filled the house with warm, familiar smells, and she treated Curtis as if he were her own son. We had turned one of the bedrooms into a guest room for her daughter to use when she visited from El Salvador. Rebecca, meanwhile, had pled guilty to fraud and elder abuse charges in 3 different states. She received a 12-year sentence. The families she had targeted were slowly starting to get some of their stolen money back. Curtis had sold the big Millfield Estates house and bought a smaller, warmer home closer to downtown. It wasn't as grand, but it felt 1,000 times richer. "Mom," Curtis said, setting his coffee cup down one evening, "I need to tell you something." "What is it, sweetheart?" "I've been seeing someone," he said. "Her name is Sarah. She's a teacher at the elementary school downtown. She's nothing like Rebecca." "What is she like?" I asked. "She's kind," he said, his face softening. "Genuinely kind. She volunteers at the animal shelter on weekends. She drops groceries off for her elderly neighbors, and she knew I was married before. When I told her everything that happened with Rebecca, do you know what she said? What? She said she was proud of me, he replied. Proud that I chose to protect my mother, even though it meant ending my marriage. She said that told her everything she needed to know about the kind of man I am. A warmth spread through my chest, deeper than anything a cup of coffee could give. She sounds wonderful, I said. She wants to meet you, he added carefully. If you're okay with that. I would love to meet her, I said. And Mom? She knows about Dad, Curtis continued. About the gambling, about what you did to keep me safe. She thinks you're incredible. I reached over and took his hand. You turned out to be a good man, Curtis, I said. Despite your father's demons, despite my mistakes, despite everything Rebecca did. You're exactly the man I always hoped you'd become. I learned from the best, he said, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. That night, as I got ready for bed in my comfortable room in our comfortable house, I thought about the woman I'd been just 6 months earlier, a lonely widow, cut off from her son, struggling financially, unaware that a predator was circling her life. That woman could never have imagined this, a home full of warmth and laughter, a son who had come back to her, a new family forming around the edges of her sorrow. She could never have imagined that her worst nightmare would be the doorway to her greatest blessing. Sometimes the deepest betrayals lead us straight to the truths we've been avoiding. Sometimes losing what we thought we wanted is exactly what we need in order to find what really matters. I had my son back. I had Maria, who had become the daughter I never had. And soon, I would meet Sarah, the kind of daughter-in-law I'd always hoped for. Rebecca tried to steal my future. In the end, she gave me something far more precious, the chance to rebuild my relationship with Curtis on a foundation of truth instead of secrets. I fell asleep that night in a house filled with love, surrounded by people I had chosen and who had chosen me right back. It wasn't just enough, it was everything. Now I'm curious about you, the one listening to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever lived through something similar? Tell me in the comments below. And on the final screen, I'm leaving you 2 more of this channel's favorite stories. They'll definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching all the way to the end.